Yeah, I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. And as some of these codes imply, I'll be talking about prediction and the best prediction algorithm known in RLSTD. So I'll be talking about different topic, a different flavor compared to what has been shown. So the kind of results that have been shown so far. So my aim is to quantify the rate of convergence of this algorithm, TD0 function approximation, and I'll present some concentration bounds and also see how this algorithm can be useful in a batch setting. And so Saturn has laid the foundation for this with all the algorithm in the background, but so I'll quickly rush through this. So what you have is a set of, you have a MDP for which you have to specify the states, actions and the rewards, and the transition probabilities. And so as you can see here, at each transition you take an action, you are in state, the MDP is in state ST and there's a control process given by AT. So you take an action AT and you stochastically transition to ST plus 1, and this transition you also get a reward. And there are many useful objectives for the control problem. So you want to find actions that maximize the value function, for instance. And the well-known property about MDP, MS for Markov, is that it satisfies the control Markov property. So it does not matter how you arrived at this state, via what sequence of states and actions you keep. The next state really depends on only the current state and the action that you take. So that's written out in mathematical terms there. And a useful objective is the value function. And so you fix the policy. So for a given policy, which is a mapping from state to actions, what you care about is the infinite arrays and discounted sum of the rewards, where the actions are chosen according to the policy. And an important result from dynamic programming is that the value function is actually a fixed point of this operator, which is called the Bellman operator, which is take the reward now and take the value of the next state. So you can write down V pi as V pi of S equals this whole thing into V pi of S. So this is the fixed point relation, and this is a contraction mapping. So the fixed point exists, things like that. And useful, the classic dynamic programming algorithms would start with the arbitrary guess, say V naught, and keep on applying this operator and finally get to V pi. And the only catch is that you need to know the transition dynamics to apply this operator on any arbitrary function. And if you don't know that, which is a practical setting, that's the reinforcement learning setting, then how do you estimate the value function? And as Professor Bhatnagar introduced, so you do stochastic approximation, and so you take a sample, you replace the expectation with the sample, and so you take one sample and then you multiply it with the step size, which satisfies some standard conditions. And this is the well-known TD0 algorithm with full state representation. The reason I say full state representation is because I maintain a table, lookup table, and I update a number for each state. So I don't do any function approximation here. And so this comes under the class of simulation-based algorithms. So you don't know the model, you take a sample in an online trajectory, and then you update your guess. And then the point about DP or dynamic programming is that you update your guess. So this is your guess based on another guess. So this is your previous guess and the reward. So this kind of principle to update one guess based on another guess is the classic dynamic programming idea. And this is guaranteed to converge to V pi under standard assumptions. Stochastic approximation arguments can be used for that. And the next thing is the problem with this algorithm is that you need to maintain a lookup table with the size, the cardinality of the state space, and then update this, do this update for all states. And that can be computationally infeasible on large state space MDPs. And the usual machine learning trick is to approximate the value function by a linear function approximation architecture. And what you do is you assume the value function is some linear function where theta is a low dimensional parameter. And recall certain stuff, this d is still a big number, but it's not a huge number. So this is huge and this big. these are the different peaks you refer to. And this is the parameter, and you want to find the optimum parameter. And these features are what you choose. So the system designer gives you the features for every state. Design the features, and you want to find the best theta. And the fixed point here is, so you approximate. So you can no longer hope to get to the fixed point of t pi because you are working within a linear space here. So the best you can hope for within this is to get to a fixed point of the projected Bellman equation. So this is the orthogonal projection onto this space. So you assume linear functions here, and then this phi is actually a feature matrix. This was seen in Sutton's talk, where each of the row is the features of each state. So it's like a S cross T matrix, where S is the coordinate of the state. So for each state, one row and D columns. And yeah, so this is all classic results. And one of the most popular algorithm, which is the TD equivalent with function approximation, is this. So what you do is you have step sizes and you replace the value. If you recall, this is a proxy for V pi of the next state. So you replace it with theta transpose phi of the next state, and the last product is actually a proxy for the current state's value estimate. And on policy setting, so I will not be trying to solve the infamous off policy problem. So just take the on policy setting, and the most well-known result in RL community is on convergence of this algorithm is by Sitzik-List-Van Roy, who show that it converges almost surely to theta star, which is actually the fixed point of the projected Bellman equation. So theta star is actually a fixed point of this, if you recall. And you can simplify, substitute for pi and t pi, and write down as the system of equations form, where A is this, B is this, and psi is a diagonal matrix, say coordinate of state space cross that coordinate of state space, and along the diagonal you just put the stationary distributions, and you assume that exists. So I'll come to the assumption. So the thing is, this convergence is almost surely is under a set of conditions which I'll just point out, and so you assume there is stationary distribution. So you assume it's ergodic, so there exists a stationary distribution. We denote that by psi, the big matrix, and then you require that the feature matrix phi has full column rank. Maybe you can simplify, but we just take the assumptions, most of them as it is from Sitzik-List-Van Roy, and this in particular implies that there is a minimum eigenvalue of this matrix, where phi is the feature matrix, psi is the stationary distribution matrix, and minimum value which is positive. And then there are two simplifying assumptions that we make. So I'll be presenting convergence rate results. So we assume that the rewards are bounded by 1, and the features, the L2 norm, are bounded by 1 for all states. And in Sitzik-List-Van Roy, they assume these two are integrable with respect to the stationary distribution. So that's a more general assumption than this, but this makes our job simpler in arriving at the concentration bounds. And then the step size condition is quite standard, and I probably encountered this in today morning's talk. And this is a complicated assumption, and this is relating to the mixing. So just I'll get back to this intricacy. So if you see here, the fixed points, the limit is with respect to the stationary distribution. But if you fix the policy, or if you see the sequence of states, it's a Markov chain. But you don't start that Markov chain in the stationary distribution. You start with the starting distribution. So you start with some state S0 and keep on applying P. And at some point it will get to the stationary distribution, and then from there it will get to this fixed point. So the fixed point is with respect to this. And what we are aiming is trying to quantify how fast it gets to there. And so we need bounds on how fast it mixes, how fast the Markov chain mixes and gets into the stationary regime. And the most general assumption is this. So what you assume is, so if you see this term, just look at these terms carefully. What you have is these samples, SNs are samples, the state samples from the Markov chain, where it's like a starting state distribution into P power n. And so you are trying to see the difference between this phi into phi transpose, you can write it that way, phi into phi transpose of Sn plus 1 and phi into phi of Sn. The difference between this, so if you see the assumption, these two terms, the difference between starting in a state S0, looking at this product, and starting in the stationary distribution. So we would like this to be upper bounded in some way. We need a meaningful bound here, and so the most general bound is like this B of S naught is integrable in some sense. So this whole assumption is as it is from the Sitzik-Lewis van der paper, and they require it to establish almost sure convergence also. And the other assumption is relating to the reward. We assume rewards are bounded by 1. So we just need the phi to be upper bound. So the difference. And this will feature in our finite time bound. So this is, so effectively we have an algorithm and it converges to this limit under the set of assumptions I just outlined. And now this is almost sure convergence. And as the famous quote goes, is an economist, John Maynard Keynes, and he seemed to say that it matters what happens in the present or in the short run. So what we are investigating is what happens in the short run of TD0 function approximation. Does it do well? What's the rate of convergence? Is it 1 by root n, which is the canonical rate, and things like that. And let me start with non-average TD0. This is the vanilla TD0. And the first thing that you care about in a stochastic approximation algorithm is how do you choose the step size. So we say choose the step sizes this way. Because C is a constant which is carefully tuned, so C has to be satisfying that condition, where mu, if you remember, is the minimum eigenvalue of phi transpose psi into phi. Phi is the feature matrix, and so you fix the step sizes this way and with that condition, and then you will get some good news. The good news is that you will get 1 by root n convergence, which is the canonical rate, which is the best rate that you can hope for any stochastic approximation algorithm. And so, okay, so this k1 of n is not really k1 of n. You can upper bound the whole thing by a constant. And if you look carefully, so there are two terms here, and this whole term is how fast you forget the initial condition. So you actually start the algorithm at theta naught, and then after a while you forget where you started because you want to get to theta star. How fast? So this is the initial condition, and if you see, you can multiply by root n and take away this half, and you assume this whole thing is greater than half. So this is like 1, so you forget this whole thing. So the initial condition is forgotten at the rate 1 by n. And this is related to the sampling. So sampling error and mixing error. So the second term, this term comes because you're sampling, there's an error in sampling, there's a martingale error that gets induced. And there's also the error due to the fact that the Markov chain may not have mixed. And so the B of S naught figures in here. And yeah, so this is an anytime bound, it holds for all n, and simple tweak is if you want to get rid of that condition on mu, you could set Cn as log n or log n, and after a while there will be a point when C will be sufficiently large and this bound will hold. But if you know mu, it's like the optimum anytime bound that you get. And going further, this is a bound in expectation, and there's a conditioning on S naught. So you fix the S naught, you see how far your iterate is from theta star and L2 norm. You're seeing it's like 1 by root n. And can we give some high probability bounds also? And the answer is yes. And again, you chose the same step size, and there's a complicated condition on C. So C has to be at least 1 by this constant, which depends on the discount, the minimum eigenvalue, and the mixing bound. And once you do this, again you get good rate. So you get high probability bound, which is like 1 by root n. With high probability, you have this. And this is a complicated mixing constant, complicated constant. And if your n is too small, these constants will be large and things like that. And the thing is, k1 of n and k2 n can be upper bounded by a constant. So the thing is, the rate is like 1 by root n. And so are we done really? So we got the best rate for TD0 function approximation. So just set the step size appropriately and we are done. So is the news really good? Any guesses? Is the news fully good? Can we get the optimum 1 by root n convergence say here or in expectation always? What's the problem? There's some problem. Maybe I can give some time for people to think. Just check the regime when under this condition you get this result. So you have some complicated condition on C. And do we know B of S naught? we don't know B of S naught, so that's the problem. And if you don't know B of S, so if you have implemented, if you have tried algorithms, even gradient descent or something, if you choose a bad step size, you're nowhere close to the optimum behavior. So a lot depends on how you fix the step size, and one mistake you're gone. And so the thing is, so the same thing have measured. So you obtain optimal 1 by root n rate, yes, but you need a lot of information about the MDP. So you're in a learning setting and you don't have this information. So these are two conditions. You don't know mu and you don't know P of S naught. And if you assume finite state MDPs, then B of S naught can actually write down an expression for B of S naught, but that would depend on some properties of the transition probability matrix. So transition probability matrix actually says how fast you're mixing, and you need to know the second eigenvalue of the transition probability matrix. So this B of S naught is like some constant divided by 1 minus rho, where rho is the second eigenvalue, and you don't know rho, so you can't set this C optimally. And so that's really the problem. And one classic solution is use iterate averaging. I'll get to there. And I just want to make a comment. Similar, not exactly similar, but there are convergence rate results which are asymptotic. So you can come up with central limit theorems which say that the iterates converge to some normal distribution and with some covariance matrix. And Kunda in his thesis showed that to obtain the optimum convergence rate for TD0, you have to use iterate averaging. Without iterate averaging, it's a problem. We didn't quantify how to choose the step size. So we go ahead and actually give this condition and show that when you can get the optimum rate for TD0. And I'll skip the proofs. And so how do you do iterate averaging? So this is the well-known scheme by Polyak and Rupert, and people interested in history, this was independently done by both Polyak and Rupert. I think about at least 4 years difference. So Rupert did it and put up on his university, repository, and Polyak independently found the same scheme. So the scheme is you take bigger steps. So alpha is between half and 1. So you take bigger steps, and then in the end you average the iterate. And this guarantees that the convergence rate is optimum for any choice of C which is greater than 0 for this alpha, and you get the same rate. So you don't have any complicated dependency on C. So the idea is, so the earlier scheme you choose a step size which is like C by C plus n, and you needed to choose the C carefully, whereas here what you do is you do two things. You do average, you take bigger steps, and finally you average the iterate. So this gives us some good results, and the idea is you get a bound in expectation. So sorry, this is theta star, this is a typo, and which is again, so this is a constant with the same kind of terms, and this alpha can be arbitrarily close to 1, so you get 1 by root n convergence here, but there's no dependency on C, so it's the whole part here. And alpha is constrained to be between half and 1, not inclusive on both sides. And the same thing goes through for the high probability bound also. So you get the same thing with high probability. The constants are all complicated, but the final rate is, so you upper bound this by a constant, you get 1 by n power alpha by 2. You can choose alpha arbitrary close to 1, but not 1. And there's a trade-off here. If you choose alpha as you go take alpha close to 1, these bounding constants blow up. So there's a trade-off here. And yeah. Any questions on the iterate averaging? Did everyone understand? Even if you forget the constants. So the problem really is that you have to choose C carefully, and you can get away from that problem by iterate averaging. So we get the high probability bound for the iterate averaging also. And so what I said is alpha can be chosen arbitrarily close to 1. You get the canonical 1 by root n rate. But the problem is the bounding constant blow up, so you can't, it's a trade-off. And so for the same reason you can't choose C arbitrarily large. But in theory you get the 1 by root n convergence at least. And I get the proof sketch. And this is my pet topic. I want to talk about a new algorithm which reduces the variance of the updates, and let's see if we can get something. So So the question really is, you had some problem with the regular TD0 algorithm with C by C plus n, and you got away by using iterate averaging. One possible intuitive explanation is that in TD0, each iterate introduces a high variance, and that has to be controlled with the step size choice. Step size can't be too large, so you have to take small steps because your variance is high. And what you do in averaging is take big steps and then you average. You average the iterate, so that kind of reduces the variance of the final estimator. So, and because you have reduced variance because of averaging, you can take bigger steps. So if you compare the step sizes, I could take bigger steps with averaging, whereas I could not take bigger steps without averaging. I can only take C by C plus n. So the idea is take bigger steps and average in the end, so you get very close to the theta star with low variance. Now taking it further, is this the only way to do it? So what we are exploring is, can we reduce variance in a different way, not by averaging in the end? And that's a question that motivated this work. And people who have taken like courses like modeling and simulation would know this technique called control variates. When you're taking Monte Carlo samples and estimating the sample mean, to reduce the variance of the estimator, you throw in a zero mean term, and so the estimator is still unbiased, but you carefully play with the zero mean term so that the variance of the estimator goes down. And you're loosely guided by the same principle. And so what you do is, instead of averaging the iterates once at the end, you construct a zero mean term we call it the centering term, and that's based on an average. So you average the iterate and then use the function value at this average point. And so you use the history really. So you use what points you visited. So you use the history and construct the centering term. And the gain is that you can use bigger step size. In fact, we show that we can use constant step sizes. So I can use a big constant step size, and I use an average, I use a center term which does the averaging. So all this is high level. So for concretely what you do is this. So let's recall what TD is doing. So TD is doing this. The whole term that's multiplying the step size, let's call it Fn of theta n. And this theta n converges to theta star, which is the stationary limit expectation of this. So expectation with respect to psi of this. And we'll denote it as capital F of theta, which is just the projected Bellman equation, and Bellman error, and you set this to 0. So what you have is, you have a sample Fn of theta from capital F of theta. And now what you do is, you throw in two terms. You average the iterate and throw in two terms. So you throw in the same function value at an average point and the expected value at this. For now, forget how we can do this, but assume we can do this. So what's the point is, this whole term is actually zero mean, because if you take the expectation of this, it is this. And so this becomes 0. So you're throwing a zero mean term. But why is this really a meaningful thing? Some intuition of that. So if you take TD0, suppose you take TD0 here, suppose this theta and iterate hits theta star, which is the optimum point. Will it stop updating? It won't stop updating. It can go to some other point. So if it chances upon theta star, it won't stop updating. And one intuition is by throwing in this term, we have ensured that it stops updating. So if theta and theta bar hit the theta star, then this is 0. And recall that theta star is the limit. So f of theta star is 0. You are converging to capital F of theta star equals 0. So the point is, once you hit theta star, you stop updating. You really stop updating. So that's 1 plus. And the second thing is, an average guides the update. So the average here is theta bar. And this term is actually guiding the update. So it's like you are centering the updates using this theta bar. And this allows using a large constant step size here. And by doing this, the question is, did we add a lot of complexity to the TD update? The answer would be no, because this update is an order of D update, and you are just doing the same thing here, where D is the dimension of the feature. So you're doing the same update at another point, and you are maintaining an average point here. And it would still be the same as TD0 if you maintain an average which is in epochs. So I'll get to the details, but we can say that in order, I mean, okay, it can add something, but it doesn't change the order of magnitude of the updates. It's still order of D. And the second thing is, if you have to do this without epoch, so what you do is you have to keep all the iterates up till n and then average them, and also keep an average of f across the entire history, and that's computationally costly. So what you do is you work in epochs, and at the beginning of each epoch you set the theta bar and only store the iterates within that epoch for the averaging purpose. So that would mean we don't need a lot of memory. And let's see, so how this centering is done. And yeah, before I get to the algorithm, there are some tricky details here. While Fn is accessible, we don't have an access to F. If you have a batch problem where this F is accessible, yes, we can do this, but F is unknown and you don't have a box which outputs F, so you have to estimate F. And the second problem is you have the mixing problem, so the Markov chain may not have mixed, so you won't get better convergence if it has not mixed. And so this is how you do it. So you work in epochs. Each epoch is of size m, so it's m steps within an epoch. At the beginning of an epoch, say m, you set theta bar m, which is the average of the previous epoch iterates, and also f hat. I'll tell you how f hat is chosen. So this f hat of theta bar m is fixed for the entire epoch, and then you run m steps and update, and then you set the theta bar and capital F hat for the next epoch. And so how do we do this? So there are two ways to average. One is to compute the average of the iterates in the entire epoch, or pick a random uniformly random iterate from the previous epoch. Both can be seen as averages in some way, and what you update is this, and this is a proxy, so you average the small f in the previous epoch. So this can be seen as converging to the expectation of this, which is actually capital F. So this whole quantity can be seen trivially as converging to capital F. I'll make one remark. So we could push this to a faster time scale and do this averaging using faster time scale approach. And the only problem is I want to get convergence rate results. So 2 time scale stochastic. So I just compute a simple multiple average over the previous epoch. Take all the values in the previous epoch, take the average, and that is used as a proxy. It's very easy to see that this effort converges to capital. We have some bounds, but it may be problematic, so let's keep this bounds. Actually working on the bounds and the second topic that we're talking about is TD on a batch. And so the idea is let you guys wake up and read this. I'll be in the job market in 6 months, and there's my DD attempt that will be taken out. So let's see what we do. So everyone knows LSTD is a very popular algorithm for policy evaluations on a batch. So the way it works is you're given a data set of one-step transitions, state, reward, and the next state. So you have T samples. And what you do in LSTD, you solve this system of equations where T is this. This is the rough equivalent of covariance matrix in LSTD. Regression, and VT is the reward matrix, weighted reward matrix. So you have T samples and you do this, and weighted by 1 by T. So suppose for people who want to connect this to TD, suppose you replace this 1 by T and put this inside and put the stationary distribution, then it's like doing TD, it's converging to the TD points to do it over all states. So the idea is you are doing a finite sample approximation of the TD fixed point by doing this. So theta T hat, as samples increase, can be shown to theta star, which is the TD fixed point. So and So the angle here is I want to reduce the complexity of this operation. So you use Sherman-Morrison lemma, recursively tune the inverse. The features here are d-dimensional. There are t samples, so it's easy to see that this is order of d square t, and the problem we see is in the d. So why is it a problem? Okay. And this is one operation. So if you have to do one LSTD operation, it's order of d square t, and it's popular because it's used in another least squares policy iteration algorithm, where what you do is you do policy evaluation using LSTD, then you get a new QPy, and you use QPy to improve the policy and iterate. And so you solve LSTD multiple times. The point I want to make is you do LSTD multiple times, and the order is this. Or if you use some solvers, so I don't know if anyone uses Strassen algorithm practically, but if you don't do Sherman-Morrison and do this, you can get something less than d cube. And there's something theoretical called the Coppersmith-Vinograd algorithm. I just know the wiki page of that. And it gets down to 2.3, but there's no practical implementation of it. It's just of theoretical interest. So you would do this. And can we get from d squared to d? That's the point. And why is this meaningful? Rich is not here, but these numbers will be favoring because Computer Go has a dimension which is of the order 10 power 6. There's a whole line of work by Chaba and Rich and Bhatnagar where they try to get down the complexity of TD like algorithms to order of t. So there's this entire series of work GTD, GTD2, and there's another work called ILSTD which also brings down the complexity. And what we propose is use stochastic approximation. And this is equivalent to saying that run TD on the batch. You are given the batch, don't do LSTD, just run TD one loop through the batch, and that will give me a complexity order of dt because I run through t samples, I do order of d update each time. And compared to Sherman-Morrison lemma, which is order of d squared t, I get order of d reduction. And the question is, does this impact the convergence rate? How bad is the approximation? If I use this in place of LSTD, what will I lose? The good news is it does not impact the overall rate of convergence in terms of the order. And we showed in a traffic control application that if you plug in this approximate LSTD where you do TD, then the performance is comparable. And the gain is in runtime because of the order of D. Okay, so just a brief primer. How do you do TD? This is minor tweak. You are given T samples, pick a random sample from the batch. So you pick SIN, RIN, and S prime IN. So you get this sample and then do the TD update with a random sample. So this is essentially what TD does. So it's order of the update if you do it from the right. And so this is the step size, this is a fixed point iteration, and order of D complexity. You do it through all the samples in the batch. So you do T steps of this. So the question is, if you do this, how far, so if you denote this iterate like this, how far is theta n? If I do n steps, how far is theta n from the LSTD solution? From this. And I would like to answer that, and before that I'll make some standard assumptions. So you assume the features are all bounded by 1, the reverts are also bounded, upper bounded, and the minimum, so you are saying that this matrix, the feature matrix is invertible. And this is a standard assumption you make even for convergence of any TD like algorithm. It's like saying that the phi is column rank, full column rank, and that means it has a minimum eigenvalue, positive. And so the first bound that we get is the bounding expectation. As usual, you set the step size as a c by c plus n, where c is constrained to be in that region, whatever I have given. And then you are only 1 by root n away from theta t hat. Yeah, as an interesting, I just forgot to mention that if you take the expectation of this quantity, the randomness is pseudo randomness, that's in that we introduced. So if you take the expectation of this quantity and equate it to 0, what you get is exactly the LSTD solution, the theta t hat. Because if you take the expectation, you get the a theta plus equals B, A theta minus B equals 0, B minus C theta equals 0. And so the asymptotic limit of this recursion is actually the LSTD solution. We are just trying to quantify the convergence rate, and we are saying it's 1 by root n away, and the same holds in high probability. And as in the normal TD concentration bounds case, you can remove the dependency of C on mu by using iterate averaging. So here if you don't know mu, then this is a problem, you can't get this rate, so you use iterate averaging. Okay, so a backslide on the constant. So these constants are all complicated, but they can be upper bounded. So they are all over 1. And, so with iterate averaging, if you recall the scheme, you use bigger steps, average in the end, and then you get the rate. And the loss in rate is like 1 minus alpha by 2, but you can take alpha arbitrarily close to 1. So for all practical purposes, this is like 1 by root n. And this is where we get. And can we go ahead? So these are the constants. And the second question is, second question is, okay, theta n is like 1 by root n away from the LSTD solution, but does this impact the convergence of LSTD itself? So how badly LSTD is impacted by using this approximation? And try to answer that question. So Alessandro, Mohammed and Remy had this result which shows sample complexity results for LSTD. So assume, okay, so for the simplest case, the simplest bound is you are given T samples, and this value function is the true value function evaluated at this T states, T samples. And this is your approximation. And my approximation here is 5 times theta of n. So I use the approximate, so I use the stochastic approximation iterate there, but if it is LSTD, so you just use phi theta t hat. So that's your value function estimate, and you evaluate it in the T norm like this, weighted norm, and there are 3 terms you get. Let's look at these 3 terms. And the first term is familiar for RL community folks because it's got to do with how well you approximate, it's got to do with the features, so this will be there always. And the second term is the sampling or estimation error, and this is of order 1 by root t. And so if you forget this approximation that I introduced, then LSTD would give you a bound with these 2 terms. And if you use stochastic approach, which is like saying run TD on the batch, then this is the additional error. So this is like computational numerical error of approximating LSTD. And if you set, so this is for any general n. So if you run this TD batch for theta of t, so it's like constant times t, then the convergence rate is unaffected. So essentially we are trying to make these 2 terms the same you are trying to make. So you will get 1 by root t complexity there also. And so the good news is that if I run TD on the batch, the bound of convergence of the LSTD to the true value function is not affected. The order is the same. And so the next obvious thing to do is try to plug this in a higher level algorithm, which is LSPI. So patch in stochastic approximation iterate for LSTD in Palsy evolution, and then do the Palsy improvement in the normal way. And so there's one minor technicality here. So here, instead of approximating the value function, you approximate the Q value function. So you are given state, action, reward, and next state. And so this is the LSTDQ solution, and this is the equivalent TD0 for Q TD. So you do this, and then you change the algorithm this way. So this is the Palsy evaluation thing. You get to in each sample, in each iteration of LSPI, you do this approximate Palsy evaluation, and then update this. So this is fast LSPI, whatever you call it. And so I use this to solve a very difficult problem. Maybe people wake up now. And we didn't solve all the problems here. Just try to optimize the traffic signal so that the congestion is reduced. And this is a plot where what we did was you have the vanilla LSPI, and then the fast variant which uses policy evaluation using stochastic approximation instead of LSTD-Q. And we see that the total delay, that's the performance metric for the traffic application, is identical, showing that both the algorithms converge to the same policy. And this is the convergence rate. So in one of the iterates of LSPI, plotted how far the iterate, stochastic approximation iterate, is from the LSTD-Q solution. And you see that it converges really fast, so it gets to like 0.03, 500 iterations. And this is not the only gain. The gain is in terms of runtime. So I took a 7 cross 9 grid, so the feature dimension is like 500. And if I measure the runtime, total runtime, this is the gain I get. But if I go on to the bigger dimension problems, then I get better gains, because practically LSTD scales with order of t square, whereas this scales with order of t. And so this is what I got. Okay, any questions? Okay, let's move on. So I'll move on to a topic that Chaba has been handling for a while. So people are familiar with this. I'll give you a practical motivation. So this was my job description when I joined Remy's group as a postdoc. I was supposed to solve this problem. I haven't gotten too far. So you have a database. You have 17 million articles. This is maintained by Nello Christiani's group at Bristol. And these 17 million articles are sourced from news feeds. So there are 2,000 news feeds. And they have a bunch of articles. Each newsfeed is a source of articles, and there's a question of relevancy score. So each article has a relevancy score, and we'll see that as the reward for the linear bandit problem. And the feature dimension is bad. So each article has a feature which is of the order, feature is 80,000 dimension. And so I'll touch upon what the relevancy score of our article is, because we are trying to optimize this relevancy score, which is the reward for us in a regret sense in linear bandits. And maybe people will wake up with some scores here. Not the cricket scores, but relevancy scores. We want to find the best news feed for crime stories. And I've just put the title of the articles. So this is the title of article which says 5 dead in a mall shooting. And this it's clearly a crime article. So this has a very high score. The scores are usually between -2 and 2. Sometimes it can go beyond. But is it a crime to drink on holidays? No. So this is not a crime article. And if you have not woken up, so this is the next question. This is definitely a crime article. I don't know if you can do it. It's a crime to raise the price of vodka, and these are actual scores from the database. I'm not making it up. So you have to believe me, or you can contact below, he'll get you access. And there's something only the Americans can tell me. I don't know much of US politics, but this is not a crime. No, this is a mild crime, sorry. Positive scale is towards crime and negative is not a crime. So I don't know why Obamacare must be defeated. So the last thing is not a crime. So you can believe this. So you take an article, collect the word, and you do. So this is a black box to me, but from Nello's group, the person who did this just told me that they do regression or SVM and do the training. So they use the words, bag of words or something, and then they train a SVM and give you the number. So they give you a number based on the article. So they give you a number. So you are given an article, not just the text, the entire article, and they do some training. So they've taken all the 17 million articles and built a SVM or some regression or something like that and give you a number based on the articles, and each article has features. So say they come up with features.
Generated by humans, or
sorry?
How the training data is generated, the label of the score of the training data?
No, it's automatic. They use SVMs for that. Each article has features.
No, but when you are training the SVM on those features, you would have the score, the training data would have the features and the
I don't know how they
you
do.
would have
I don't know the
buy
inputs.
it.
I'm a bandit guy, so I have to just raise my hand and just say, I'm given this input. I'm given 17 million articles. Somebody has told me each article is some reward. And my problem is to select the best newsfeed for crime stories. My problem is without visiting each article in some brute force manner and saying, okay, I saw 10 million articles and this is your best crime feed. No. I'm just saying, okay, visit as very less number of articles. How they did, I don't know, but I'm given features. So that's my problem. It's actually complex. The inside joke is complex is modular. So complex stands for composing learning in modular. I can't remember. So we are not supposed to know what happens in the other module. So this is Nello's block, and the idea is Nello's block can be replaced, module can be replaced with some other module, but my bandit algorithm works well. That's a justification for complex. Okay, so we'll get to linear UCB now, and Chaba has introduced this well, but I want people to understand UCB better, so I'll give a different take on linear bandits, which Chaba did not give. So anyway, so the idea is you have arms, and you choose an arm which maximizes the UCB, the arm with the best UCB. And so the rewards, choose an arm, you see a reward. The rewards are linear. So all this is known from Tuesday or Wednesday. So Tuesday. So you get the reward. And then you estimate UCBs. Okay, I've given the estimate, but forget somehow you estimate this UCBs. Feed it back and choose the reward. And the question is, in plain K-AMP bandit, what do you do? How do you compute the UCBs? You take the sample mean and you throw in a confidence term. And if you take the beer analogy, you are given 4 taps. So you sample each beer. So you drink each beer, and then after, I don't know, a week, after 10 rounds, I don't know, it depends on the person, but after 10 rounds, you know which is, based on your UCB estimates, you can say this is the best beer. So that's the best arm. But linear bandits take a different approach. You have a lot of beer taps. Lots of them, millions, or even big. You have a continuous space. And so the point is, you cannot tap each and try the beer and then say, okay, this is the best. So you do linearity. So idea is, you assume the rewards are linear. So what you want? You want an estimate of theta star. If I give you theta star, then I know the quality of any tap because I take the features of X. So I get the quality. So that's the point. So the fundamental philosophy is you want to get to theta star. And one way of doing it is you do regression, you get a theta hat, and then you make it the center of an ellipsoid. All this Chaba motivated well. And or you can throw in a confidence term, or you do regression with confidence sets. This is a particular instance which we call linear UCB, which do confidence this way and do this. So the fundamental difference is this. So you optimize the beer before you get drunk. Whereas the other way, get drunk and then say this is the best. So this is a new insight. This is not mine. This is actually given this perspective was given to me by Remy Munoz, who was my postdoc host. Yeah, so this is how linear bandits get a different motivation. And so the question is, what more can be done with linear bandits? So the question is, you have the regret, and you want it to be sublinear. Linear bandits ensure sublinear regret. In fact, they ensure order of O tilde of D root T regret. And my approach is actually more computational. So it's the same approach that I did for LSTD. Linear bandit, each round you solve a regression problem, and it's order of D square. And if you have high dimensional features, this is computationally intensive. So can you do something simpler and still get good regret bounds and good practical performance? So this is a typical machine learning algorithm. For example, bandits, where you choose the arm, you say take the reward, and then you compute a regression estimate, and you use this to choose the next arm. and so you do regression in each round. And the idea is, it's very well known that you can use fast stochastic gradient descent, or what we call as online gradient descent, and it comes with order of D complexity. It is quite well known. What is not really well known is you can come up with high probability bounds for this. Not fully known, we give those bounds. And we also prove that under a restrictive assumption, the regret actually, we don't lose much in the regret. We lose only log factors in the regret. We still have the root t, but with the t does not the exponent does not decay with respect to t. We just throw in log factors. If you do it, if you patch in SGD, so effectively what I'm saying is, if you take the linear bandit algorithm, okay, I'll come back to this. I don't have that figure, sorry. Okay, so this what, so we patch, so the one thing is linear SUV is a well-known algorithm here, and we use this fast GD, and the results, the nature of results that we have is for strongly convex bandits, we could show, okay, I'll quantify what this strongly convex bandits is subsequently, but we show that there's no loss in regret, okay, except log factors. This, the bandit community does not care about log factors. So, and non-strongly convex bandits, we have good empirical results on the Yahoo data set, which was the genesis for linear SUV algorithm, and also on the complex Newsfeed database. But doing theory is getting incredibly difficult to show that using SGD we don't lose much in regret. I'll give a loose motivation on why it's difficult. So I didn't put this on. Okay, so what we do is this. So what you do is, don't solve regression, you take a random sample from the history and do one sample gradient, one step of this. And this you use as a proxy for theta n hat, which is the regular least square solution. And this is how you do it. Again, just this random sampling is because you take the expectation with respect to pseudo-randomness that we introduced. This, you take uniformly a random sample. So at n you choose a sample with probability 1 by n, all samples. So if you take the expectation of this and equal to 0, you get the least square solution. So theta n will converge to theta n hat, but we care about the drift, so I'll get to the drift soon. And make some simplifying assumptions. The features are all bounded, or the arms features the same, are bounded. The noise, so you assume the reward is linear, so there's a noise. My simplest case is zero mean. I didn't do sub-Gaussian. And you have the minimum value of this matrix. And note this is actually a very strong assumption. You have 1 by n. So this should hold for all n. And this is quite difficult in linear bandits. The intuition is, after a while, linear bandit will start choosing the same arm. And so there's no way you can get this thing. And that's indeed true. So for a specific bandit setting, we could, without any tweak, we get this assumption. And I'll get to that. Something wrong with this. Yeah, some problem with the slides. Okay. So these are the finite time bounds. And what we have is, we show that for all n, the difference between theta n and the least square solution is of the order 1 by root n with some constants. And this holds both in high probability and in expectation, if you have those assumptions satisfied, especially the thing about minimum eigenvalue. And so if you see the expectation bound, this is the initial error, and you assume mu c greater than half or something. So this is forgotten, the initial condition is forgotten faster than this term, which is the sampling error, and the overall rate is like 1 by root n. And there's some dependency. If you don't know mu, then you can use iterate averaging and get the same order bounds. I'm not presenting those bounds. And so this is really nothing to do with bandit. So you're given samples, and those samples satisfy those assumptions, x and y n's. And now I patch in this thing. So at each point you try to measure the distance between your iterate, which is using SGD, to the regression solution. and we say that it's only 1 by root n away if you have the 3 assumption, which is in particular the minimum eigenvalue assumption. And if you go ahead, this is very useful in one particular algorithm called phased exploration greedy exploitation. This is an algorithm from a Sitzik-List paper in 2010 for a specific class of arms. I'll get to that, but the way it works is this. You are given a basis and it uses the basis arms to explore. It pulls on each basis arm once and then observes the reward. So that is the first step. Okay, I use losses. Okay. Yeah, it observes the losses and then computes the ordinary least squares estimate here using the basis arms. So it works in cycles. So I forgot to say that. So in each cycle, there's an exploration phase and exploitation phase. In the exploration phase, you pull the basis arms once, and in the exploitation phase, you pull the greedy arm. So you have this theta hat, you pull the greedy arm, and this can be any arm. Only here you choose the basis arms, and among the decision space, you assume this to be compact. You pull this greedy arm, but how many times you pull? You pull it m times. So the idea is this theta hat converges to theta star. So asymptotically, you're pulling only this. But it's trivially can be seen that you're pulling only basis arms, so I get the minimum eigenvalue safely, because for training the regression estimate, I'm pulling only the basis arms. So I get this. And so the tweak with FastGD is you again pull the basis arms, but don't solve the regression problem, but use this fast gradient descent iterate, the update rule. So you do one step of fast gradient descent iterate, picking a random sample, and then you exploit the same way. And now the question is, by doing this patch with the FastGD, do I lose something in the regret? And luckily, no. This took us 3 months to realize. And the assumption A3 is for PEG, and we didn't introduce it. And it says that, though this is the tricky assumption, it says that if you change the underlying parameterization, so of the linearity from theta to theta prime, then the best arm changes smoothly. So if you assume the rewards are like theta star transpose x. So if I change theta star to something else, then that arm in g of theta is smooth, so it's Lipschitz. And this unfortunately does not hold for a finite set of arms. This holds, for example, if the arms are on the surface of a unit sphere or sphere probably. And from Sitzik-List paper, this can be seen as a strong convexity condition on the arms. I didn't understand it fully. So that's why we call it strongly convex bandits. But the cool thing is this. So if you forget this k1 of n square, then this is the regret bound for PEG. Okay, with the regular PEG, with does regression the usual way. And if we patch in ours, we throw only log factors. K1n is only log factor, but log power 4n. So the order is the same, root t. So this is good news. And okay, so we'll get to the bad news. So this is how the non-strongly convex bandits work. The way we do fast linear UCB is there are two places we use the regression estimate, and for both of them we patch in a fast gradient descent. One thing is the mean parameter, so instead of theta I had put this, and you replace A inverse x here also by a FastGD iterate, another different iterate for each arm. And so you reduce the complexity by order of d, otherwise the algorithm is exactly the same as linear UCB. And there's another problem, is that this minimum eigenvalue assumption will no longer hold in linear UCB, because it can pull any arm, and if I have to do gradient descent and meaningfully converge, then I need this kind of assumption. And so we do this artificially. So what we do is we do adapter regularization. So suppose based on the data there is some lambda n that I can put. So this will mean the minimum eigenvalue is at least lambda n there for that same matrix. And then what you do is just this. So you You pick a random sample, you do the gradient descent update, but only minor tweak is this, you put this because you regularize it this way. And the question really is, how do you choose lambda n? Is there some choice of lambda n that gives me sublinear regret? And the answer is no. Before that, actually there's some mess up in the slides. Actually there's some reordering, and I want to show why deriving bonds is difficult for the PEG algorithm. Sorry, 2 slides got displaced somehow. And so the idea is, okay, forget what I said about linear UCP. So you have this PEG and you are trying to measure this tracking error. So the point is, you don't have one, you have a drifting target, and I'll show you why it is drifting. So at each point you want to track the corresponding least square solution. So a simple thing, patch in the theta hat n minus 1. The first 2 steps are simple. Then you substitute the update rule for theta n. Theta n is updated this way, theta n minus 1 plus gamma n times that sample gradient. And then you unroll this recursion, so until 0. So what you get is this term, which is the initial error, so where pi n is something like this. And these matrices are controlled really well. So this E bar has a minimum eigenvalue and all that. And the second term is a martingale error, which is the sampling error. And this is a very bad third term. And that comes only because of this particular setting with drifting target. So earlier SGD schemes, if you have just one target, you would solve one batch problem, you have a solved target, then the same analysis go through, you don't have the drift term, and you just have these 2 terms, and it can be handled really well. The problem is because we get a drift term. At each point, a difference between 2 least squares estimates come in there, and we don't have control over that because the data does not come from a distribution. We don't have any, so in classic least square solutions, when you have the samples, you assume the XY pairs come from a distribution and things like that. But here what happens is the bandit algorithm is choosing the X. So there's no inherent distribution, which is very nice. So you have this tracking error, and it's very hard to handle this tracking error. And for this particular first setting, we could handle it because, okay, I'll just recall something. You are trying to solve Fn of theta at each m. You want to minimize Fn of theta, and theta n hat is the solution to it's minimizing Fn of theta. And then note this an bar and also the expected reward. You have a theta star there. And we control the drift error using some simple technique. So you know that theta n hat minimizes Fn, theta n minus 1 hat minimizes Fn minus 1, so the gradients are all 0. And then you substitute these expressions from there and rearrange it, you get this. And this is a nice expression, and what you get is the drift is controlled by the convergence of theta n hat to theta star, which happens in the case of strongly convex banded. So if theta n hat converges to theta star, the drift goes away. The other term, this is a noise term which can be handled. And the key is actually a confidence ball result, which I take from Ashadani. Now I realize I can take some lemma from Chaba's paper also. But it's really, the key is like we can handle the drift term here. But using the same argument, we can't motivate. So now switch over to the non-strongly convex bandits. You do linear bandits like this with fast GD. And let's see if we can do the same argument for the drift here. And remember, we don't have the luxury of having a minimum constant eigenvalue. We have lambda k or lambda n at time n. And so for the initial error to be forgotten, it's easy to show that you want, so you do the same thing that I did before, decomposition and unrolls. Just want to point out that this equation 3 is an equality. So this it's not like some suboptimal analysis at least. So you want this to go to infinity to bound the initial error. And one natural choice is you take the step size 1 by n power alpha, and that means the lambda n has to be at least 1 by n power 1 minus alpha. And this turns out to be a really bad choice because the drift error becomes a constant. You can simplify and show. And so for general linear bandits, we realize that unless we change the algorithm or confidence, what you call ball, the way it's constructed, it's very hard to get SGD to work. This is not a concrete, this is just a motivational thing, but you have difficulty in trying to get SGD to work in theory for this. But that's not the end of it. We can do news recommendation. Yeah.
I just had a question. Would it be possible to not, so to avoid the drift error, you could do this kind of lazy updating so that you don't really care about updating very frequently, like we often do that, like
Yeah, whenever the UCBs change
you are
also.
changing policies very frequently. You change login times in advance.
Yeah.
If you do that, then here the drift error will just go
No,
away.
the problem is because if you say this, if you look at this matrix when you solve the regression, right? Where is the set of the matrix? Where is A bar? Oh God, there's some mess with me. Yeah, so that is the matrix. Okay. So lambda min, that is xi transpose. It does not matter if I do lazy updates, but as long if I choose the same arms, I won't get the minimum eigenvalue. So the problem is really that the gain I got in the PEG algorithm was because I'm always choosing the basis arms for training, not for the exploitation, for training the regression. So that gives me a minimum eigenvalue, it does not matter. But here in a linear UCB I can choose any arm, so I don't get the minimum eigenvalue, and I have to do something artificial actually. I have to put in lambda n and things like that. So even if I do lazy update, I have to solve the same or similar regression problems, and at least the analysis techniques that I know, if there is no convexity or minimum eigenvalue, I don't know how to analyze SGD techniques, at least the analysis.
I just got confused because you called it the drift error. I had the impression that it's coming from, or at least in the previous case it was coming from, because the solutions to these problems are changing as time goes
Yeah,
by.
right. The drift error is here. It's
Yeah.
still the same. But the drift here is now with the regularized, adaptively regularized problem.
So if the theta, if the theta to the k minus 1 for many times that, then that chart will go away. Right? So if you wouldn't like add the data that you collected, then it would just go away. That term would just go away. Except for those time steps when you would update. So you would like collect the data, but don't update theta together.
Yeah, probably something like that has to be done. I have not thought along this. Yeah, that's interesting, but without inducing any more assumptions on the structure of the arms or something, not clear it can be done. Yeah, I don't know, tried this, but tried hard on this, but few days back I have a direction for this. I don't have a result, but I believe if you have the context of the features generated using a distribution in each round, such that the distribution, the minimum eigenvalue of the arms, the features only in that round is positive, I think it can be fixed. Though I'm not fully sure. So we have to get away from this problem of any x can come and things like that. Put a distribution somewhere, but we don't lose much in terms of the assumption. I'm not saying how the arms are chosen, but just the features if they come from a distribution in each round, such that the distribution is good in some form, like it gives me a minimum eigenvalue, probably. So I'm trying to explore, but there's something we gave up after about 2-3 months back. Yeah, so I want to explore this direction. I accidentally ran into this direction a few days back, so I don't have the full result yet. But this seems reasonable because if you just take the regular linear UCB and try to do SGD, it's very hard to get the theory right because this drift error is complicated. And so that's not the end of it. So we can apply still in practice, but even though people don't really believe, so I'll leave. I still have 15 minutes, but I don't have that much material, so I can let people read this in detail. I'm working on a news recommendation application. Yeah. In machine learning. Dilbert is my favorite strip. So the point is, okay, so the first plot that I'll show, which is colorful, manufactured, is I just plotted the cumulative reward for the complex application. So you remember we had the relevancy score and all that. So I ran linear UCB, I passed in the gradient descent version, I plotted the cumulative reward. This is a bad plot because the rewards are all negative. Rewards are the cumulative reward is slowly getting negative, but the performance is comparable. Just want to make this point. To find a way to mirror this plot into some way so that it's positive. But the other thing is the well-known data set is actually from Yahoo. They have a user click data set, so they have millions of records where each record is user features, and so some user came, he was presented say 30 articles, the 30 features of the 30 articles and the user features like where he came from, gender, age and cookie, some data from cookies, and what article he clicked. So each record is that, and you are given millions of records like this, and using this do an offline evaluation, come up with an algorithm that comes up with a very good recommendation strategy in the regret sense. And using this data set, they came up with linear UCB, which is loosely based on linear bandit ideas. And so the idea is this comes from the Yahoo Today model. There's one article which is blown up and shown, and so that's a bandit problem to decide which articles to put here. And what we did was we took plain naive SGD, whatever we showed, and also two competent approaches. It's very popular for speeding up batch solutions using stochastic gradient descent ideas. One is from Tongzhan and Rai Johnson and Tongzhan from NIPS 2013, where they reduce the variance by throwing in a centering term. And the other is by Francis Park and his group, where they get, so both of them get exponential rate, but they use different approaches. Here they reduce the variance this way, and here they do some form of averaging, and they store the entire list of samples. And I'm just plotting the tracking error here. The tracking error is at each point, so this is actually 4 into 10 power 4, it's like 40,000 iterations of linear UCB I'm running, and in each iteration I'm solving the regression problem and also doing this SGD and the other competent algorithm. It's seeing what the difference in norm is like, and it's quite low, so it gives good empirical results. And but it's hard to do the theory. So, and the angle here is this. So if you do normal regression, it takes a lot of time. If you do plain or naive SGD, it takes very less time. These approaches vary. They do something more than SGD, they do some more bookkeeping, and also they take little more time, but all the SGD approaches take much less time than doing naive, general Sherman Morrison Lemma kind of approach. So that's the angle here. And if you are interested, please look up the first part of the talk where I presented TD concentration bound is up on archive, and the LSTD thing is in ECML, and this last part bandits is AAA this year. Yeah, so I'll end with this. So that people are not depressed after my talk. Questions? Yeah.
So, in this last experiment, maybe we could try a lazy approach and compare.
I didn't try that, yeah. So you're saying that lazy approach is to sort the UCBs each time, and only if there is a change then do it, or what is the lazy approach?
It would basically monitor the determinant of the data covariance matrix, and when the determinant is doubled or something, then it would recompute the least squares solution.
Oh, okay. So you're like
Otherwise it wouldn't recompute.
so it's like almost like doing the linear UCB, but solving regression in like only if the data changes a lot.
Exponential.
Yeah, data changes a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't try that.
Usually bring the application pretty close to the actual.
Yeah, I didn't try that. I got another lazy approach is like where only the UCB, some top UCB changes, then update the other UCBs. I got confused with that.